But Matthew chapter 1. I'm glad to be here this morning. Big day for us. We're celebrating 60 years, right? You'll see as we go through the history this afternoon and read, you might be a little confused. You're going to read some things like in 1956, we had a Bible study. There was meetings, but we organized as a church officially in August of 1959. So there were some Bible studies going on before that, and they were a mission. But we've been a church now for 60 years this month. And as I begin to think about, we planned back in the spring to do an anniversary service, I begin to think about what should I preach today. And I plan out my sermons, and I knew I'd be ending our series last week, and I thought, I don't want to start a new series today. I want to preach something to challenge us. And about a month or two ago, I planned to read through the book of Matthew in my personal Bible reading. And one of the things that I'm guilty of is sometimes when you get into Scripture and you come to genealogy, you skip through it a little bit, right? Especially the Old Testament, the book of Numbers and things like that. When you get to Matthew chapter 1, the first 17 verses is a lot of names, some of them difficult to read and to pronounce. But I think they're important and they're necessary for the foundation of Matthew's book. And this morning I want to look at this passage of Scripture here. A lot of the Gospels begin with the birth of Christ, and some of them begin with His ministry. And Matthew goes even before His birth to write here. And I'm not going to read all of this because I don't want to read all the names. But there's a couple verses here, and so we'll jump around. Follow me as I read. But in verse 1, it says this: the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat Judah and his brethren. So he is beginning to give the family history of Jesus here, right? It begins all the way back in Abraham, who we know is the father of the Jewish people. And we sing a song out at youth camp, and I don't know if you guys know it, but Father Abraham has many sons, and many sons have Father Abraham. And we know that to be true today. And of course, you know, Isaac and Jacob and Judah. But skip down with me to verse 16 now. I told you we'd skip a lot of names. Verse 16. And Jacob begat Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who was called Christ. So all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. And from David until the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations. And from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. As Matthew begins writing his account of the gospel, he plans to write about all the wonderful works of Jesus and His ministry. All that He's done, all that He is doing, all that He will do. Remember that as he writes the gospel, he's not writing this as he's with Jesus. He writes this after the death of Jesus, as he sits down and recounts of the ministry of Jesus and his time with Him. And he begins his writing with the history of Jesus' family. The genealogy all the way back to Abraham. And from that this morning, I want us to realize something. That the best way to, I believe, to view our future is to sometimes view our past. To challenge us to persevere in our future. And today, as we celebrate and remember and memorialize our history and our past this morning, I also want to challenge us to continue on into the future. And I really didn't know what to title this message: Past, Present, Future, or Where We've Been and Where We're Going. I want us to look at three phases in the life of our church today. And number one, where we've been. Now, we've not changed location, but we've been a lot of places and done a lot of things. I want us to see, first of all, where we've been, our foundation. In August of 1959, our church was formed and began because some people had a vision and a burden to start a church in this area to reach the surrounding communities with the gospel. And today I am glad that they did have a vision and that they did start this church. We are able to reap the blessings of other people's vision and work today because 60 years ago they said we need a church. We ought to be thankful today for the founding of this church, the members who put the work and the effort and the thought and the money in to putting this together. Later this afternoon we'll see a list of all of the pastors, and we can look. The very first pastor we had was Oakley Ripley, and no doubt he did a lot of work here to lay the foundation. The members, many of you know, and if you don't, my great-grandfather was one of the founding members here, and he's in that picture on the back wall at the groundbreaking service. Many of my grandmother and even some of my aunts and uncles came here as children. And the foundation that was laid for us so that we might have a place to come and worship today. I think it's important for us to remember and to give thanks for what has been done in the past. We have been able to come to a church that is solid and a church that is secure and a church that gives us support because of the work that was done when it was founded. But today I want us to also not betray that foundation. This church was founded as a place for Christians to come and to find fellowship and to find support and to find help in their time of need. It was founded so that this church could reach the community and even the world with the gospel. And today I want to challenge us as a church not to betray that foundation. To continue on the vision that was laid when it was started. But not only the foundation, I want us to do the history. Let me say we've had a great history. In my nearly 2 years here as the pastor, the more I've gotten to know about you people and the more I've gotten to know about this church, the more I have seen the hand of God using this church in this area. Through the years, you've seen dozens of people saved and no doubt scores of people baptized. Countless lives changed. Hundreds, if not thousands, of messages from behind the pulpit and lessons taught in our classes. And today we take some time to remember those. I'm sure you could talk about some messages that you remember, the preachers preaching from here, and memories of activities that happened at church. You could talk about times that God spoke to you through Harvard Hills Baptist Church. We could go around the room. I imagine some of you here today were saved here at this church. Most of you were baptized by this church. And the fact that God has been able in the past to do great things, we stop and remember. But I'm thankful that God didn't just use this church in the past, but that He is currently using this church. Not only where we've been this morning, but number two, where we are. We have come a long way, and I'm thankful for where we are. We see here two things under where we are. First of all, the present success. God's been good to us, and He's blessed us. I have seen a lot of things in just my short time here. I think about the very first Sunday that I came here, the church looks a lot different than it did in just 2 years. We've got more people here today. We've seen the salvation just in the last year. We've had a baptism. We've seen growth, not just numerically, but spiritually, I believe, today. We've seen spiritual growth in the life of this church. At least I hope that you have grown, because I know that I have grown. We've seen not just spiritual growth, but we have seen a physical bond grow between us. A success, in my opinion, of every church is that the people would support each other in fellowship. Amen. I think we have had some wonderful success as a church today. But I don't want us to simply rely upon our present success, because sometimes that brings present complacency. We sometimes grow a lack of fervency resting upon our past accomplishments. Churches, we come together on this Memorial Day, and it's easy for us to allow this to happen in our hearts and our minds. We look back at all of the great things that we have accomplished as a church, and we tell ourselves in our mind, look at all we've done, we can take a little bit off. Look at everything that's been accomplished, perhaps we don't have to work as hard. I think about the verse in Proverbs. It says, where there is no vision, what does it say? The people, finish with me. The people what? Perish. Can I tell you this morning that the number one reason churches fail is not just because they don't have ministries and programs, not just because there's lack of preaching or whatever it is. It's because churches don't have a vision. Amen. We use that verse a lot in context with the fact that if we don't have a vision for the lost and a vision for the world, and I know I preached a message before under that verse, if we don't get a vision for the lost, that they'll perish and have an eternity without Christ, and how true that is. But if we don't have a vision as a church to continue to grow, the church will perish. Right. We see churches all the time closing their doors, churches going bankrupt, churches losing members, churches struggling just to keep the doors open, churches without pastors, and I wonder how many of it is because there's no vision for the future. I hope today that we are not satisfied just where we've been and just where we are and resting upon what has been accomplished, but that this morning we are focused on where we are going. I believe tonight is important for us to understand that we have to have a vision of where we are going as a church, or we'll never get anywhere in the future. Right. I'm thankful for the last 60 years, but can I be honest with you this morning? I hope that in 60 years, we're not in the same place we are today. I hope we don't look back and say, well, the first 60 years was really good. The last 60 years has been average. Can I be honest with you? The church has seen amazing things in its history. But I pray today that the next 60 years is even greater than the first. Right. I pray that the accomplishments that this church has seen pale in comparison to what God can and will do with our church if we simply humble ourselves and submit to Him and let Him use us. But I believe this morning that if we are going to go somewhere, we've got to have some goals. Future goals. Where there is no vision, they perish. And I pray today that this church does not perish. I pray that this church continues to grow and to thrive and to be successful. But if we don't get some goals, we're not going to get there. We had a salvation this year back in our revival, and I'm thankful for that. But can I tell you this morning, I am not satisfied with one salvation in a year. We had a baptism and with Justin just recently, about a month or so ago, and I'm thankful for that, but I'm not satisfied with just one. My prayer is that it would be a weekly occurrence that God is saving people through this church. We'd have to have baptisms monthly just so that we could keep the people who are coming to the church and wanting to step out in faith and believers' baptism getting baptized. We've got to have a vision bigger than just the mundane, bigger than the normal. Can I tell you, normal never got anybody anywhere in success. Right. Normal never got anybody anywhere in the walk with Christ and being used by Christ. There's a lot of people who didn't want to be anything but normal, and that's fine, but it took some weird people sometimes to be used by God. or I believe we should have some future goals. I want to see God use this church greatly. I want to see people saved and people baptized and people growing in Christ and discipleship. Wouldn't it be something this morning if we as a church would commit to saying, God, I want you to use us to save people. I want you to use us to help people grow. Wouldn't it be something if we as a church could get a vision and a goal to see people saved? We begin to pray that God would bring people, that they would come and hear the gospel. I wish that we would get a goal today as a church to be able to say we need to start not just changing our community, but changing the world. We talk about all the churches that are closing and all the churches that are struggling and all the churches that are on the verge of closing, or churches that can't find pastors. Can I tell you something? I believe this morning that churches start other churches. And we're going to see this afternoon. We have been a part of planting 2 different churches and missions. But I also believe this, that churches train men and send them out. Wouldn't it be something if we could begin that God would send us young men to train and then send out and ordain and send them to these churches in our area? I mean, they're looking for pastors. Wouldn't it be something if we could say, God, let us use us to train these men, and then we could send them to pastor these churches, to save these churches, to grow these communities. The effect that we could have. We can't reach every community, but we can send people to reach them. Right. I have a vision today that we would begin to train and send people out to help these churches today. We've got to have some future goals, because without them we'll never have any future success. I said this talking to a group of young men a couple weeks ago, and if I say something smart, no, it's not because I'm smart. It's because I just get lucky every once in a while. Broke clock's right 2 times a day at least, right? I said something and I didn't even know I said it until my brother said it in one of his sermons, and I thought, man, that's so good, I got to write it down and make sure I take credit for it every chance I get. I said, a plan without action is just a dream. A lot of people have a lot of plans. But if they don't ever put any action behind that plan, it'll just be a dream. Talking to a lot of young men who, about 3 or 4 of them, it was at youth camp, and 3 or 4 18-year-old guys who were considering going into the ministry, and they said, I want to be preachers, and they're talking about, they want to be great preachers and pastor big churches. And I said, that's great, you've got a big plan. So if you don't put action behind that plan to get where you want to go, it'll just be a dream. Right. I've seen a lot of young men in my time, younger than me, my age, older than me, with a whole lot of plans to reach the Word, but never wanted to put action behind it. Ends up being just a big dream. I hope today that our goals aren't just dreams. We talk about seeing our church grow. Is that just a dream? Or is it a plan? We talk about seeing spiritual growth in our lives. Is that just a dream, or is it a plan? We talk about getting closer to God. We talk about reading our Bible more and praying more. We talk about seeing our children walk with Christ closer in their life. But is that just a dream, or is it actually a plan that we're going to put action to? Because I hear a lot of dreams. I have a lot of dreams, personally, professionally. But I find many times I don't put any action behind them. And they stay dreams. Can I tell you this morning, the future success of this church will be dependent upon the action and the service and the faith that you and I are willing to put into this church. Amen. This church is here today because of the work and the effort of people in the past. And some of that success and some of that work is because of us here. Some of you have been here for a long time, and I've been here a short time. But can I tell you, if we're going to continue to move forward, it's going to take continued service. Hey, I've been in churches that grew, successful, financially stable, and they got reliant upon their past. And today are a shell of what they once were. I've seen churches who less than 10 years ago ran 100 people. Today run 30. I'm not naming names, but we can go right across the McCluggage Bridge right here. I can think of a church that just 10 years ago was arguably one of the largest Baptist churches in the city of Peoria that last year closed its doors because they didn't have enough members and couldn't financially keep the doors open. I mean, if you had asked me just 7 years ago when I was in high school, if I thought that church would ever close, I'd tell you no way. It's gone. Why? No vision. No action. Can I tell you how quick we could be there?
Right.
If we give up and grow complacent with where we are. And so this morning, as I challenge you and I, as we remember our past, and it's wonderful. You read through Jacob and Isaac. In verse 5, he tells about Boaz and Ruth, about how that marriage, and he comes from that line, and Jesse and King David and Solomon, all the way down. I'm thankful for our past. Thankful for every man, for every pastor, for every family, for every woman, for every child that has committed to help this church. But let us not fail them in their memory by letting down the work that we have. Paul says, let us run the race that is set before us. This morning I pray that we would run that race with boldness, with faith, action. Say, God, we've got some big goals here in the future, and we want them to be big successes. Listen, I want us to be used, but it's going to start today. So let's commit to be used by God. I want to see salvations. I want to see baptisms. I want to see growth. I want to see God begin to use us to reach other places, to start other churches, to revive other churches. But it's going to require some action, some faith, some service, and even sometimes some sacrifice. Where we were, where we are, and where we're going. May God continue to use us for His glory this morning. And may God continue to grow us closer to Him. Sister Janet, would you come?